Hello YouTube, Poobslag here, and this is TurboFat, an open source game I'm developing using the Godot engine. You can find a link to the source code at the GitHub page in the description below. And this month I was working on some cutscene logic where when you go to launch certain levels, instead of just diving straight into the puzzle part of the level, it'll have a little interlude with different characters and some scripted dialogue and animations and stuff like that. It may look like this is some pretty trivial stuff that should have already been covered by the dialogue engine I had in place, but tying this into specific levels and getting different characters to load up dynamically and stuff, that stuff actually did require a little bit of architectural changes in code shifting, so let me get into what I did. So when I originally designed the creature's dialogue logic, I gave each creature a dialogue tree defined in JSON, which defined a bunch of conditions and said if they meet condition 1, go have conversation 1. If they meet condition 2, go have conversation 2. And some of those conversations could have levels attached to them. So it'd say, go have conversation 2 and launch this level. However, I later added an entire level tree which said which levels unlock other levels. If you beat levels 1, 2, and 3, you can play level 4. At best, these two mechanisms were redundant, but at worst, they were contradictory. There were times when talking to a creature on the overworld would let you pick a level that you hadn't unlocked yet, and things like that. So to reconcile this, I made the tree of levels the authoritative model of whether you were allowed to play a level or not, and removed all the dialogue branches from creatures, which launched levels. Now those conversations are just attached to the levels themselves. When you talk to a creature who has a level associated with them, if it's an unlocked level which you haven't beaten yet, the creature will offer to play that level with you. Overall, it's a simpler model. It'll make it easier to add levels. It might change a little over time, but I could see this working for the final game. Alright, so for getting all these characters where they belong in a cutscene, like in these 6 specific locations, one naive approach might be to say, for this cutscene, Bob needs to be at location 800,70. But a numerical approach like that seems a little short-sighted to me because in 2 weeks I might go and add more furniture or make this room taller or wider, and all those locations would change, right? And I'd have to go back and change all those numbers and all those cutscenes. So instead, I used a spawn object, which I defined, which is a node 2D. So it has an X and a Y coordinate over here. This one's at 1854, 142. And then each of those spawn locations also has an ID and an orientation. So it says this one on the right side, it's called Kitchen 3, and it's facing to the left. If a character is in this location for this cutscene, they're going to face to the left to talk to the other characters. Those IDs, like Kitchen 3, are then referenced by each of the cutscene JSON files. So skins spawns at kitchen-3. And then as far as the code for locating those corresponding spawns, I don't know of any way in Godot to comb the node tree for objects of a specific type, but the node groups make it easy to, if you just make sure all the objects of that type have a specific group, then that seems to work fine. So I loop over all the nodes in this spawns group, find the ones with the corresponding ID, and then once I find it, I move the creature to that location. So yeah, that's what I came up with. So TurboFat's a little bit unique in that, at least in my vision for it, the creatures aren't all a fixed size. You could have creature A who's in a very important cutscene, and you feed them way too much, and now they're enormous. So I needed to make sure the cutscenes would work no matter how big or small the characters were. And so I created this cutscene demo, and I made it so that you can say, what if all the characters are huge? What if they're all very small? And then you can play any given cutscene you want. So it does work, and it did immediately find some bugs where, like, the creatures, if they were this huge, they just wouldn't even all fit in this room, and they would spawn out of bounds and stuff like that. So to fix those kinds of bugs, what I ended up doing was saying, during cutscenes, we just disable all collision. These guys don't collide with the terrain, they don't collide with each other. That way, if there's any sort of glitches, they might just be little visual glitches where they'll clip into each other and not look right, but it won't be mechanical glitches where, like, you can't even see any of them, or they can't walk to where they're supposed to because they're too big to fit in the hallway. So yeah, that seems to work, and this cutscene demo I think will be very useful as I continue to develop more cutscenes. I also wrote a shell script to automate more of the build and release process. Godot automates a lot of this stuff for you, but there were a few extra manual steps I was having to do with every release, like zipping stuff up and doing some renames and things like that. So now that's all automated. I did look into some other tools like GitHub Actions, and Itch.io has its own thing called Butler, but that stuff seemed like a huge undertaking, and I wasn't ready for it yet. So for now, this is fast enough. So I wanted to talk a little about staying motivated on a long-term project like this. I really like Jerry Seinfeld's don't break the chain methodology. It works pretty well for me. The way it works is you set a daily goal for yourself, like I want to work on my game for an hour every day. And then every day where you successfully meet your goal, you put an X on a wall calendar, and you keep adding more and more X's, and try not to break the chain of X's. In a typical year where I have a project like this, I'd get to 30 or 60 X's, and then I'd go on vacation or have a late night out with friends or whatever and miss a day. But this was a weird year, and with coronavirus floating around, I started my streak in February and kept it going all the way through the summer, fall, and winter of 2020 until around January 12th, I could just feel the gears in my brain going slower and slower. I don't know if it was just mental fatigue or if I caught some sort of virus or something happened in my brain. I got a carbon monoxide detector and I got tested for COVID. But whatever it was, honestly, human beings need breaks sometimes. That's all right. But regardless, I'm changing my habits to follow something called the Pomodoro technique, where rather than sitting down for an hour and working continuously, I work in little 25-minute bursts and then take frequent small breaks. I'm also trying to change my mindset so that rather than thinking, I have to work on this for an hour a day, I can't break the chain, it's more of just a compulsory, work on this when you feel like it. If you need to take a break, take a break. That's where we're at after January. We got a little bit of the cutscene stuff implemented, but it's not all the way there yet. And honestly, I think there's enough left where it's probably not going to be done next month either. But, it's a lot to do. So all I can say is I'm further than I was at the start of the month, and next month I will be further than I am, and we'll get there when we get there, I'm trying not to stress out over arbitrary milestones as much as just trying to stay motivated and make sure I keep working on the project. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So thanks for sticking with me. See you guys next month.